Redditors, what are your most interesting roommate stories? My roommate in college claimed he was involved with the mafia. He was constantly sweaty, was very jumpy, and always had a lot of cash in his car. He never was around on the weekends, and I never saw him drink. Strangest of all is that he never once slept in his room. He was always on the couch by the door. He eventually told me that it was because if anyone ever broke in looking for him, he wanted them to find him right away, so no one else would get hurt. I still don't know if he was telling the truth, but nonetheless, I always locked my bedroom door at night. I used to cook dinner and always made enough to offer our roommate. He always paid his bills and rent, but sometimes he didn't have enough for food, so I would cook and say, "Hey man, want to have dinner with us?" He would usually say he didn't like whatever I was making. Fast forward to the morning, all the leftovers were gone. His explanation? He must have been sleepwalking and ate it in his sleep. This happened 15 to 20 times over a year period, minimum. He would make these big song and dances about how what I was making was gross, so I would put up enough leftovers for two, my boyfriend and I, then go to bed. What was to be lunches for work gone, and often dirty utensils in the sink. Fast forward another 5 years, and he called me at 3 a.m. after not talking to me or my partner for 3 years, and told me how my now husband, aforementioned BF, was doing crack in front of our 4-year-old. I called my husband, who was asleep. Neither of us had talked to him in years. What was this? Fast forward another 5 years, he's on death row for killing his roommate. His defense? He did it sleepwalking. I'm pretty sure I used to live with a hobbit. Man, about 5'1", curly brown hair, constantly cheerful demeanor, never wore shoes, inside or out, literally slept on the floor in what can only be described as a nest of blankets. Started a garden and encouraged me to eat his tomatoes all the time. Would bring home samosas and other goodies, always giving me half, just because. He and his wife had a dream of living off-grid in a tiny home on a truck. I had a roommate that became very susceptible to suggestions when he would first fall asleep, and wouldn't remember anything he did the next morning. One time, we woke him up and told him that his girlfriend had stolen his shoes. He jumped out of bed, went to the landline phone, yes, I was in college 20 years ago, called up his girlfriend and accused her of stealing his shoes. We were all dying laughing at this time. She blew him off, and after he hung up, he went to the kitchen. When he came back, he was holding 2 brownies and had the saddest look on his face. "Look, my girlfriend burnt up my shoes. I'll never be able to wear them again." He placed them next to his bed and then went back to sleep. My freshman year college roommate was a random pairing. This kid partied all night and slept all day. Legit wouldn't wake up until 5 p.m. He goes MIA for like a week. I call my mom because I'm not sure if he's even alive. She searches to see if he has been arrested. Before she can call me back, cops are knocking on my door and ask, "Have you seen blank?" And I say no. My mom calls me back a few minutes later. He had been booked for a robbery at a convenience store which was in our dorm building. He tried to hide in an air vent. He made the front page of the campus newspaper, was expelled, and I got the whole dorm to myself for the rest of the fall and spring semester. This is my only roommate story. After this, I swore never again. A childhood friend and her boyfriend, he was a chef, line cook at a chain restaurant, who would cook mediocre meals when the urge took him, which took darn near every pot and pan in the kitchen to make, and effed off without cleaning up after himself. He also had a cat, kitten really, who he never bought food for, so I had to feed it because I'm not a monster. She was an unemployed student, like me, who would use the cups from my dinner set as ashtrays, and load up every single plate of food, take it to her room, eat from it throughout the day, and keep it. Rinse, repeat, every day until we were out of plates. I said I'd clean them if she just brought them back to the kitchen, but nah. I'd have to wait until she was out, then go get them, complete with moldy food remnants. Eventually, my boyfriend joined our happy little household, and I started setting boundaries because it was no longer 2-to-1. That led to a blow-up screaming match, and me and him moved out. My only regret is that I didn't take the cat. My last 2 roommates were a married man and his side chick. We lived in a shared house, and the man recommended his girlfriend to the landlords after another roommate left. I had no say in it. His wife lived and worked in Germany while we live in the US, so he easily got away with it. They were cool with me, but it was very uncomfortable to watch, especially since I met his wife when she came to visit him before I knew about the girlfriend. He was so much meaner to his wife, too. He'd complain about her cooking and make her cry, but with the girlfriend he was Mr. Nice and Mr. Helpful. I don't know if the girlfriend knew he had a wife or not. I woke up at 5:30 a.m. and made my way to the kitchen, groggy and barely awake. As I turned the corner, I stopped in my tracks because my roommate of 3 months was crouched on the counter, wearing a Speedo. In a Gollum voice, he said, "My precious," and mimicked Gollum's weird movements. I refused to react to it, said nothing, and made breakfast. It's been 10 years and we're still great friends. I was 19 and had to move in with a friend directly in front of a college campus. Our friend group always talked about his roommate, who they called Crack Lord Jeff. The day I met him to discuss rent, I expected a college student more so, but instead I met this guy who's at least 6'5", 300 plus pounds, and insanely schizophrenic. I was down on my luck and moved in the first night he gave me a shot of Skull vodka. And as I took the shot, he chugs this giant bottle of it like it's water. I was beyond horrified, but was younger and just went with it. The next day, he punched a hole in the wall and called it renovating, and then proceeds to pin a Lay's bag to it and said, "It keeps the CIA away so they can't communicate with the KGB to put me away in AA and kill me." All right, definitely crazy. For a couple of months, I went to hide in my room and couldn't be around my roommate as his antics were always out of this world. My roommate one night was messing with him because he was messing with us, and told him that if he shaved his head, he'd look like Bruce Willis, and everyone would take him more seriously. This was a joke because we were just being goofy, but Crack Lord took it seriously and shaved his head. This guy is huge, and now he's terrifying. Another day, he knocked on our room and said he was going to liberate South America, and we saw him out the window ride his bike with a wall-sized Brazilian flag tied to his head. Then he shut his phone off and went missing for 2 weeks, except for a random Facebook post between forest and power lines. He came back without the flag and bike, and we still have no idea how he got back in anyway. Every day was an experience around him, but it's something that I reflect on almost daily and tell myself, why did I do that? I hope the best for the guy. I have many stories about him and proof of it, but that's one of the craziest times of my life, honestly. I had a college roommate who was obsessed with CSI. She had CSI pillow and sheets and blankets. She refused to turn on any lights and kept all the blinds shut. She hated light and would sigh loudly if I would turn the lights on to do anything. I went to college right around when you needed a college email to make Facebook work, and she would tell me that Facebook is how they spy on you. She said she would never have a MySpace or anything like that. She might have been right about that one. And she would always say I was a sheep and that I would have my identity stolen by them. My other roommate, we were 4 with 2 bedrooms and a common area, was extremely loud at all hours, and if you ever asked her to keep it down, even politely, she would purposely start doing cartwheels and banging on things and singing. She claimed to be Jay Leno's niece. One more. I had a roommate that slept with a new guy every weekend, and we could hear her loudly through the walls. We would tell her we heard her, and she vehemently denied every time that she slept with anyone. Come on, girl. My roommate decided to repaint her car in the garage one night. She proceeds to hand sand back the silver paint on her old Volvo and then whips out cans of red spray paint. She spent ages freehand spraying that car with the garage door closed and without any ventilation. After she'd moved out, I was visiting a friend in another city, and I noticed a spray-painted red Volvo parked below the flat. Turns out she'd ended up moving in with my completely unrelated friend for a while, and managed to convince the old guy downstairs to buy the badly painted car. Same roommate worked shifts and would vacuum and stack dishes at 3 a.m., because why not? I had a very religious roommate once named Mike, who thought I was religious too, I guess, and he would often exclaim things like, "Oh my God, there's so many people outside, we should be evangelizing." He would never read any books except the Bible, literally, and he would often pray right in the middle of the common space on his hands and knees. Weird guy, but he always paid his rent on time, kept his dishes clean, and it's hard to find roommates. Anyway, one day while I was reading a book in the living room, Mike came out looking very concerned and asked to talk. "I think there's a demon living in this house," he said. I'm the kind of person who likes to yes and people, especially when they say something a little crazy, so I asked him to tell me more. "Well," he started, "last night I had a dream. No, not a dream, a nightmare. A snake was choking me, and I was fighting with it." He exaggerated hand movements a little too aggressively to demonstrate his wrestling. "Finally, I threw it off me, but then I realized I was awake, so I sat up and looked over at your side of the bed, and that's when I saw it." "Saw what?" I asked, more excited by the second. "The demon. The dark cloud man was just standing next to your bed, watching you sleep. He was like a cloudy shadow with white eyes. I think it's possessing the house." Amazed by what he was saying, I asked what we should do about it. "Have an exorcism." I almost spit out my drink. "Well, I've never done that before." "I have," he interrupted. So I was like, "Well, if you say so." Anyway, basically he had blessed holy water from the tap and was walking around the room, tossing it here and there, yelling, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave, demon." Meanwhile, I'm trying not to laugh for the whole 30 minutes until he finishes. He's literally sweating in prayer and finally stands up to say, "It is done," and walks to his room. We never talked about it again. Not exactly a roommate. Had to live at a friend's place for 2 weeks, and he lived with a roommate. Anyway, one morning I wake up to find my friend missing. He had taken stuff too, so I asked his roommate where he was. We didn't know each other at all, and he said he went to a different city for a job. So, a few days passed by, and one night I was alone. I hear the doorbell ring. I open it. It's the roommate, covered in blood. I just ask what happened, and he said he passed out and fell into the rose bushes. He then gets naked, and I have to clean him up and send him to bed. After that, we became friends. I lived with a wild card of a roommate freshman year. I'll have to just start listing the things he did, otherwise it would fill up a book. To summarize, he spent little time on his studies and was mostly concerned with doing wacky and mostly illegal stuff. Became an LSD dealer by ordering LSD on the darknet to our dorm room mailbox. And the blotters would arrive in between 2 stapled sheets of paper that were BS'd to look like we received an actual letter. Built some big antenna contraption thing in our room so that he could beam Wi-Fi to the parking lot outside of the dorms, which is where the smoker shelter was, where he spent a lot of time. Started a cricket fighting ring. He kept the crickets and cups he stole from the dining hall in our dorm. They chirped in the middle of the night. Broke his clavicle wrestling at 3 a.m. in the woods near our college with other stoners. I had to convince him to call emergency medical service, otherwise he would have just sat in our room screaming and moaning all night. Emptied out his dorm wardrobe and put a big fish tank in it. He then stole some fish from the university's pond. The tank was never cleaned and it smelled horrible. Fed a tab of LSD to one of the above fish, and it never behaved the same again. Took the bathroom door of someone else's dorm off the hinge to use as a laptop table, where we could play Minecraft with other degenerates from our hall. The next year, he moved into an off-campus apartment with one of my friends. When visiting my friend, I would witness more of his antics. Building a forge in their backyard. By forge, I mean a hole in the ground where he was melting aluminum foil into ingots for fun. Threw a party inviting several drug dealers, who were not even students at our school, one of which stole my friend's PS4. Installed listening devices in their apartment during a conflict with his other roommates. Just in general, inviting many drug dealers and strangers into the apartment on a routine basis. My friend eventually kicked him out and got better roommates by the end of college. The one redeeming quality is that for a time, the guy got interested in baking decent bread.